In my opinion, these are the two witnesses. These are two disciples that will not die until that day by the hands of the Antichrist at, Jerusalem, the abomination that causes desolation. The key to this, I know many people believe that Enoch and Elijah are the two witnesses. But the key to who they are is their title, witnesses. What did they witness? Enoch and Elijah. What did they witness that would have the world celebrate and give gifts on their death? The two disciples, who I believe are these two, are John and Thomas. John is the one that has the wounds in his palms of his hands and the silver hair, and that carves black, or has the black crosses around the bottom of his robe. Thomas is the brown-haired, curly-haired guy, in my opinion. And these two witnessed Jesus' life, his death, his resurrection, and him going to the right hand of the Father. And also the Spirit of Yahweh being poured out and witnessing everything. There's the title. And Yeshua, Jesus, said that they would be witnesses to all corners of the world. So, in my opinion, I know before I used to believe that the witnesses were Enoch and Elijah. But the Mormon Church has used their cult belief that these made-up stories are speaking of Jesus, when Jesus said, no, every eye will see him when he returns. And so, the ones that went and witnessed and proclaimed the good news were his disciples that nobody could kill, and still can't kill until that day that it is allowed by the Father, and they will see Yeshua's kingdom. That being said, let's carry on. Guatemala. The priests of Ek-Balaam. The Pale One went to Ek-Balaam, whose location is no longer remembered, where the priesthood of the tiger waited to deceive and kill him. We will offer him a captive. If he takes the sacrifice, then he is silenced, for he goes against all his teachings. Yet if he does not, we will declare him but man and kill him, and break his body over the idol. Along the highway to Ek-Balaam, capital of the sacrificers, came the healer receiving the platitudes of the people. They strewed his pathway thick with flowers. They brought to him their sick and injured. They cried his name. They touched his garments. Many were the mothers and fathers who held up their little children that they may look upon the Pale One. Past the ball fields and the great parks, past the houses whitewashed neatly, past the well-kept gardens, past the markets, and past all the business buildings went the sandals of the healer, and behind him like a mighty torrent, running, pushing, jostling, shoving, came the multitude of the people. He thrust aside the jeweled gateway with a gesture of diversion. The first of the mob now seemed reluctant, for this was the courtyard of the bloody tiger. Yet the prophet had neither stopped nor looked behind him. And so, like a dam that is shattered, the people burst in and swirled around him. Quietly he walked on through them and ascended the dreaded stairway. Halfway up he was met by the blood-smeared, black-robed high priest of the tiger. No man dare climb these steps of the blood god. Come you as man or a god from the great veil? I come to you in the name of my Father, the one and only God of mankind. I bid you cease these sacrifices. Then you come as a god, and we welcome you as one. We bring unto you now a sacrifice to show you that we know you. Statuette. The priest stood waiting, while the people in the courtyard held their breaths in mortal terror at the daring of the Pale One. This was the signal for the priesthood to drag a chained captive forward, bidding him kneel before the healer, before the priest could raise the knife to strike him. The Pale One touched him, and his chains were shattered. Arise, my friend, and join the people. The people stared as if in shock, but not the high priest. In a flash, he raised his knife blade and stirred it toward the prophet, screaming, "Thou art not God. You are a demon who fooled us. You cannot feed on life blood. You are but a man with human pity. Die as men die. For the tiger." The Pale One raised his palms before him, and the high priest saw in each one a large cross torn in the flesh. He stood as one transfixed. "Why not strike down with the knife and kill me? Come now, ye cannot. Why do ye tremble?" Then he turned and faced the people. "Men of the Kishi, I bring to you a message from the God who has no image. He dwells beyond the rainbow. He lives in the lava, moves in the oceans, breathes in the wind, storm, and made all things from ant to tiger. There are but two trails to follow. One is the way of my father, and one is the way of the jungle. You have chosen to follow the latter. Think you there is power in that image? That rock has only the power that you give it." In the swirling around, he picked up the now falling long and whirling around, he picked up the now fallen long knife, the knife of sacrificing, and smashed it upon the face of the idol. That is how strong is the law of the jungle. The eaten or be eaten, kill or be tortured. Death ends all, and so let us forget it and obey the law of our stomachs? You think of yourselves as strong men who crush and take from the weaker neighbor. Stop and look down the vistas of history. Where are the nations who lived by the jungle? Where is the world encircling power of the serpents? It was crushed by the flood of my father's making. Where are your strong men who lived by evil? They faced judgment for breaking the great law of my father, greater than all earthly precepts. That law is this: love one another. Another note is that these two would get the tribe that they would go, and they would give the two their names. So these ones never went and said, "My name is so-and-so." The people would give names, and like how they recognized Moses and that as God, these ones too were recognized as God by these ones, by what they did. Carry on. Mexico, the god of wind and water. One of the greatest miracles attributed to the prophet took place in Panuco, along the shores of the Sunrise Ocean. The healer knew that the legends told to the children about fighting animals were in truth the histories of the people, passed down thus through the generations. Only upon attaining manhood and the status of the warrior would the child learn the truth of these well-known stories. Often he had read these ancient histories and discussed them with the priesthood. Well, he knew that the name serpent stood for the earth's sea people, who had once with their fleets ruled the oceans and established colonies on many shorelines. He knew that the word stood for water, even as did his first name, Waku. Wa meaning water, and Ko for serpent. It was a tribute to his power over the ocean, when at his command it had cleansed the temple at the Pachacamac. One of his favorite books was that ancient history which had come down to his time through many ages, from the day when the Red Land, which had fathered the serpents through colonies and fleets of the ocean-going vessels, went down in the fury of the volcano destruction into the cold green depths of the ocean. Proof that I am a serpent, by the last remaining grandson to leave the doomed homeland, with its eyewitness description by the young prince from the house of Voltan, was often read by the prophet. Yet closing its pages, he would warn the puzzled priesthood to copy it very often, sending it to many nations, so that one copy might escape the flames. For when he touched it, he saw its final destruction in the Holocaust, which turned it to ashes. Note, it was burned by the conquering Spanish. Up to now, Great Serpent had been his only title because of his amazing power over water. In long forgotten ages, the islands of the serpents had been beset by another totem. These were the men of the wind god. They twined feathers in their hair and shot with bows and arrows against the poison lances of the serpents. Finally, this ability to kill at a distance overcame the proud sea kingdom already harassed by the fire god, which it worshipped. And the victor was the bird of the lightnings, known around the world as the condor. Most deeply did the serpents respect him for his control of the mighty ocean, but the men of the bird of thunder and lightnings were skeptical of the power of the prophet. All that was changed in one day of terror in the low-lying land of Panuco. It was a sultry day, the air was heavy, and all the animals were taking cover. There was a feeling in the air of tense expectation, as if something enormous was about to happen. Along the sea, the people were gathering, staring at each other with frightened faces. Last night the great condor was seen, the thunderbird who lives with the lightning. He swooped very low and flew landward, warning us of the wind god's anger. Perhaps craftily smiled one priest of the wind god. The great one called by us the breath masters resents the presence of the healer, known to have power over water. Yes, perhaps that is true, murmured the people, shrieking away from the sight of the white robe as the healer and his priests came toward the seashore. Then, out of the heavens came the giant condor, more than the height of 2 tall men, from wingtip to wingtip, flying low to escape the whirling death storm and streaking rapidly up the river. Again he comes. Let us fly to the great caves. Let us all run inward toward the safety of the jungles, away from the breath master's fury. All you who believe in the power of my Father will remain with me, the prophet said softly, and nothing which comes from the air shall have power to harm you. So the people remained, kneeling and praying as he had taught them. Also, the skeptical priests of the wind god remained behind to watch this madman who dared to question the might of the death wind, terror-stricken from other encounters but unable to lead away the people. Then at last all saw it coming, like a giant black tail hung from the storm clouds. It swept toward them across the ocean, cutting the waves, churning the waves into watery mountains as it crazily swung even closer. When at last the first thrust of the great wind struck them, the healer stepped forward toward it, raising both hands high above him so that all could see those strange palm markings from which some said stood for the 4 directions. In the name of my Father who rules the heavens, cease be thy fury, calm be thy waters, soft be thy breath. As the breeze of springtime, thou shalt be caressed. These people in the name of my Father. Those watching stared in unbelief as the tail of the monster, the swirling death storm, withdrew into the heavens, and the sun broke through the scattering dark clouds. Then all the people fell upon their faces, calling to him, Thou art Hurukan, the mighty. Thou art indeed the great wind master. Now we know that thou art the wind god. But the healer shook his head and told them, "Of myself I can do nothing. I pray you call me not the wind god. The power lies in the great spirit who rules both the wind and water." Yet still the people bowed before him, and Hurricane, meaning the great storm, became his name throughout the broad land. And from this time on among all the nations he was known as the Lord of Wind and Water.